Busy?
Super busy.
I know.
Yeah.
Rachel,
Advantage incumbent, it's good. Yeah.
I think Rachel hung.
Are they supposed to be here?
Oh, man, you went back and got the full
Our
meal.
folks, 30 seconds, please, 30 seconds. Welcome, everyone. This is our Assembly of Governments meeting. It is January 28th, 2020, and we are in Hillsborough in the Whitted building. And I always do my little history lesson on the Whitted building before we start, especially for some of the folks that haven't been to one of these meetings before. This started out as the all-white school in Orange County. And too bad Earl had to leave. Earl has a medical emergency that he had to attend to. He actually went to school here, and in this room was the auditorium where he learned how to play the piano and gave a couple of recitals. So that was the original use of this building, and then the building turned into what's now the Orange County Health Department, which is in the building right over there. And then this part of the building had some offices that were here. And this was the Orange County Library, just this one room. And as the Orange County Library grew out of this space, it was repurposed to be a meeting space for the people of Orange County. And we meet here at least twice a month, but the room is book solid all the other times. During the day, it's used for educational purposes and training. And in the evening, anyone in Orange County can use the room. They do have to go through Parks and Recs, but it is a well-used room, and it is a meeting space that we absolutely needed here. So enjoy it. You will hear the train go by every once in a while. Kind of just adds to the atmosphere of the room. So welcome. I think we should start by going around and introducing ourselves. And last time we did this, we asked where you were born. Because we discovered that not too many people actually were born in North Carolina. So David, we're going to start with you, and you have to tell us where you fall in your family line. Are you the first, the middle, or the baby child? And then everybody else has got to follow along, all right? Tammy's taking notes.
Okay. David Andrews, Town Manager for Carborough. Was born in Freeport, Texas on the Gulf Coast, and I'm the last of 9 children.
Ooh.
Pop that.
Not going to try. Maurice Jones, Town Manager, and I'm the firstborn in my family.
The oldest.
Is this on? Yeah.
Chapel Hill Town Council, born in Chapel Hill, and youngest of 2.
Have to press the buttons. These are stay on by themselves, supposedly.
Thank you. Sammy Slade, Carborough Town Council, 3rd of 4, born in Redlands, California.
Good evening. I'm Susan Romaine, newly elected to Carborough Town Council, born in Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm the youngest of 4. I have 3 older brothers, and that experience served me well, running against 5 men for the town council.
Tai Huynh, Chapel Hill Town Council. I was born in Clearwater, Florida. I'm the oldest of 2.
I'm Mark Mercopoulos. I was born in Brockton, Massachusetts, and I am the older brother.
Amy Ryan, Chapel Hill Town Council. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and I am the oldest of 3.
Lots of oldest.
Damon Siles, Carborough Town Council, McAllen, Texas. I'm the oldest of 2.
James Zetta Bedford, Orange County Commissioner. I was born in Arlington, Virginia, and I'm the oldest of 5.
Hillsborough Town Board and Mayor Pro Tem from Nashville, Tennessee, descended from Quakers in North Carolina, from Orange County, and I'm the middle of 3.
Barbara Fouché, Mayor Pro Tem, Carborough Town Council, born in Duplin County, North Carolina, specifically Kenansville, North Carolina, and I am the baby of the family.
Heminger, Mayor of Chapel Hill, born in Charlottesville, Virginia, oldest of 5.
Lydia Lavelle, Mayor of Carborough, born in Athens, Ohio, home of Joe Burrow. I am third of four. But my parents had 2 boys, 2 girls, and my mom always said she wished that the girls had been born first.
So Penny Rich, I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I am the middle child of 3 girls.
Weaver, Mayor of Hillsborough. I was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and youngest of 2.
Michael Parker, I was born in Manhattan, Chapel Hill Town Council, and I am the first of 2.
Renee Price, born in Rochester, New York, and I'm the older of 2.
Matt Hughes, Town Commissioner in Hillsborough, though I was born in Winston-Salem, lifelong resident of Orange County, and the oldest of It's Complicated.
I want to hear more, but Carrboro Town Council, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but I always say that I actually grew up in Carrboro because I was in my late teens when I got there. And I am the third of 4.
Sally Green, Orange County, born in Gilmer, Texas, and I'm the oldest of 2.
Jess Anderson, Chapel Hill Town Council. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and I am the oldest, middle, and youngest.
Mark Dorson, County Commissioner. I was born in Long Island, New York, and I am the eldest.
Randy Haven O'Donnell, Town of Carrboro Council. And I was born in New York, New York, oldest of 2.
My name is Alan Boincy on the Chapel Hill Town Council. I was born in Evanston, Illinois, and I'm the oldest of 4.
Bonnie Hammersley, Orange County Manager, and I was the third of 4.
All right. We got a lot of oldest. All right, Tammy, is that good? You're going to be able to analyze that? You're good. Okay. All right. Oh, we didn't. Oh, okay.
I'm the Hongbin Gu. I was born in Shanghai, China. I'm the middle child.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to start with the Green Track presentation, and Travis is going to help us with that. And then we're going to have a discussion about that, and if anyone needs to look at a resolution, I think we all know what the resolutions look like, we can take a look at that later. But Travis is going to start us, and then we'll continue that conversation.
Thank you, Chair Rich. My name's Travis Marin. I'm the Deputy Manager for Orange County. Proudly supported tonight by joint staff from Town of Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and our own Orange County Planning Department. So when you see the term joint staff team, those are the folks who are implicated in that group. So I thought we'd start tonight just by saying congratulations. As of this week, everyone has adopted the 2020 Green Tract Resolution and interlocal agreement to fund an environmental assessment of the Green Tract. I will note that the resolution that is in your packets isn't the one that was adopted by everyone. We had to get the Assembly of Government packet out before the last minute changes could be made to that resolution. So I'll briefly summarize the 5 primary provisions of that agreement. One was that we would pursue jointly an environmental assessment of the property and cost share that by our typical cost share formula, 43% Orange County and Chapel Hill and 14% Carrboro. We would also jointly pursue a memorandum of understanding that would outline a decision-making framework as we move forward. And also that document will also describe future community outreach efforts. We agreed to have a joint public information session that includes all 3 jurisdictions, a minimum of 2 months after the environmental assessment is completed. One of the tasks that was given to us was to lay out a timeline, so I'll be doing that for you also in a slide. We also agreed to jointly not to initiate any further public engagement until that memorandum of understanding document was completed, and then agree to the discussion that we're having here tonight at the Assembly of Government meeting. So in terms of the schedule, at your places, you should have a document that looks like this. One side says green track schedule environmental assessment. The other side says memorandum of understanding and other action items. So we'll start with the environmental assessment. So that scope of services is nearly complete. We plan to have one final staff review of that and then be able to release that document in early February. We would then review those as a joint staff group and be prepared to award a contract to a consultant sometime in early April. By June 7th, we anticipate to have a first draft of that assessment complete so that we can begin digesting those findings and recommendations. We also need to, during that next month or so time frame, have discussions with the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools District on what the draft says, what implications that might have for the school site that's contemplated on the green tract, and talk with them about next steps for further analyzing where that school site ought to go. In mid-August, we'd be prepared to bring back all of that information to a manager-mayor-chair meeting, and then in September, have a jointly planned community meeting. Now, I'll tell you that this time frame is a little conservative. We could accelerate it a little, but that would put a public meeting sometime in July, August, and probably wanted to shy away from having a community meeting when people are out on summer vacations and whatnot. But if requested, that timeline could be slightly condensed. In terms of the memorandum of understanding and sort of other things that will be going on, so these things will be going on all simultaneously. We're not going to wait for the environmental assessment to be completed before we jump into these other tasks. So coming up in mid-February, the attorneys are now exchanging a draft of that memorandum of understanding. We're hoping that's ready for our mid-February meeting of the managers, mayors, and chair to review that, at least initially, provide feedback, and so we can start going through the discussion and revision process. That will go as long as it needs to go. We did not put a timeline for adopting that MOU in this timeline on purpose because we're, a lot of that has to do with things that are outside staff's control, but it might be something you want to discuss tonight in terms of a target date for that. And then in mid-August, then we would review the status of that MOU. By that time, it could very well be adopted by all three governments, but at least reserve a time on that agenda to review the status, formally review the environmental assessment with that group, review some draft metrics. So the resolution had some broad goals for the type of development and preservation of the property. We can put some goals and objectives to that and get down to metrics so that we can, when we receive development proposals back, evaluate those proposals against the metrics that were derived from the broader goals that were contained in the resolution. And also in that mid-August meeting, we would then schedule presentations to the governing boards for one of your first meetings coming off summer break. So that's all of the additional content we had for you tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Yep, hold on, Barbara, 1 second before we start asking questions. The Assembly of Government meeting is considered a work session, so we're going to call everyone by their first name, if that's okay with everyone. I know it's a little bit harder for staff to call everyone by their first name. We understand that, but this is meant to be an open discussion for us to have. So if we can keep it as informal as possible, that would be great. And take it away, Barbara.
Thank you. So thank you so much for that, Travis.
Yes.
So my question is, number one, Memorandum of Understanding. Discuss memorandum of understanding for future decision-making processes, managers, mayors, and chair meeting. So it's going to involve MMC as well as our attorneys as far as pulling that document together. And it also was not clear to me about when the MOU in draft form might be ready, and could it be ready by June?
Sure. So I can leave probably the second part of your question to the mayors and the chair. But so that MMC group typically includes the two mayors, the chair, the managers from each jurisdiction, the attorneys, and then the planning staff. So that whole group will get together to review that initial draft, and we would expect something to come out of that. I don't know if Chair Rich or either of the mayors want to address a targeted timeline.
We were waiting till after this meeting to hear what all the questions and concerns were that we could bring back to our mid-February meeting, where we could see if you were aligned with thinking about timelines and activities. And there's a lot that's involved legally. There's a current MOU from 2002 that's so vague it's been a little hard to work from. So we didn't want to use that as a template. We used a template for doing the environmental impact study collaboration, I guess. And I don't know that we know how to answer that till we've had our
So you're
MMC.
starting from scratch, is basically.
Well, we have a template from that and a template from the water and sewer that we did before
Right.
together. So we were hoping to use that template, but our attorneys were busy looking those over to see how we move forward.
Well, and I'll just respond also that, so we'll get together, and I know the attorneys are looking at a draft MOU right now, and it is my hope that maybe we could get something together by June. And I'll be interested in hearing what other folks have to say about that, but I do think that what will go into that MOU is not entirely complicated, but it'll just involve conversation among the different boards and the MMC meeting. Travis, Penny and I were just talking. Maybe it might be helpful just to explain the legal ramification of an MOU.
Right.
Just
What is an MOU? And it's, we know it's a governance document, but why are we doing an MOU?
Right. So so an MOU, we can call it an MOU, we can call it an interlocal agreement, but it's an agreement between or among governments that is prescribed in statute as a way for us to make agreements. And the end goal of that document is to have some time frame and decision-making framework for things that happen that where we might not agree on everything, how those disputes get resolved, how those questions get answered, and who's responsible for moving those things forward. And once all of us agree to that, that would come back to each of the respective boards for their adoption. Does that give you a good enough?
Yeah, I think it's a good enough start for everyone to start with. Jackie, yeah.
Thank you. Could you please, Travis?
Can you talk into the mic?
I'm sorry.
We are on TV, by the way, everyone, so you need to talk into the mic and look your prettiest when you talk into the mic. You look very good.
Simultaneously?
Simultaneously.
Could you please put the schedule back up?
Sure.
So I just think in terms of expediency, that it might be wise for this to come to the boards before all of the work has gone into it. So maybe if some kind of check-in point could happen where the mayors and chair check in with your boards, like, how do you think this is going? Because I'd hate for all the work to go into it, and then it gets to the boards, and the boards are like, what on earth is this? And then you're back to square one. So maybe the schedule could just have some built-in check-in points.
Can I address you? Sure. Yeah, no, I agree, Jackie. And that's what we tried to do after the other MMC meetings.
Yeah.
We should do that. And also, as we know, we all received the copies of the minutes of the MMC meeting we had in December. We can also get those out as soon as possible. And I know y'all talked about that at the BOCC meeting.
To maybe even have it, to go one step further, to have it like on the board's agendas at a certain point, so that it's it's a formal check-in. And then when it's on our agenda, the public's more aware of it too. So if there are any public concerns, those kind of get filtered and addressed as we're working through the process, rather than to have staff and you three work really, really hard and come up with something that then falls apart. So
Right.
I would like to request that it be
And I think I just want to
formal
follow up with,
check-ins.
with what Lydia said, and that's actually, so this schedule right here is just a first, sort of like a first shot at. Mark Dorson asked for this at our last meeting, just so we can have some guidelines for this meeting to see how everything flows. But there'll absolutely be check-ins along the way, because you're right, it doesn't make sense to create an MOU and then have to start all over again. So there will be check-ins along the way, but we do need to allow our lawyers, because it's a legal document, we do need to allow our lawyers to start the process, which has already started. Our attorney was charged with starting the process, and the other attorneys already have the MOU in their hands. They were just all waiting for this conversation to happen tonight to see if there's anything else that they need to be aware of before they move forward.
Great, thank you.
I saw some hands up. Jess?
So Travis, could you clarify a little bit? I saw in the slides there were 2 places where the staffs were collaborating together, I guess on scoping and selection of the consultant or something. So what are the other places where the 3 jurisdictional staffs are collaborating? Or can we assume that that's all along the way, or?
Yeah, I think I received a comment today from one of my colleagues saying that we should make sure it says joint staff, and so that'll be assumed throughout, that all of these things that staff is undertaking is done with all 3 parties.
I was hoping maybe, not to hash out tonight, but maybe the MMC could address, are there places where the public can give input before it gets all the way to the point where it's been through the MMC and then it's coming back to the boards? I think if there's some way, when we're talking about refining the goals and principles and the metrics, I think that the public should have some ability to weigh in at that point, or have some, before it gets fully baked and is now just coming out to the boards, that there should be some way that the public is involved.
Well, this might be, I don't know if John or Nick, or if someone wants to address this, but I kind of view this as a legal document that references the resolution that we all already passed, that has all of the goals and objectives and kind of what we're looking for, but then has the legalese of, here's what the parties are all going to do, here's the percentages, here's what happens if someone wants to opt out at some point. That's kind of the way I viewed it, not in any sense, for example, of how the green tract is going to be further developed or something like that. I don't know, Travis, am I right with that?
Yes. John, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate at all on.
Right now, it's an outline. It will have public participation requirements in it. It will have other legal requirements in it. And the boards will ultimately decide what details are, not the lawyers and not the MMC.
One more point. I know the other night we talked about this at length at our meeting too, and of course we'll adopt it in open session and we'd have opportunity for feedback then from the public. So.
But I'm talking about the goals and principles and the development plan. Are you saying that's just in the service of developing an MOU?
We're not talking about the development plan right now. We're talking about an MOU that's a governance document that shows how the partners move forward.
I'm talking about number 3.
So I can help maybe. So I think what we envisioned there was that the MOU would come first, and we as a staff can start working on developing those goals and principles based on the broad goals that were adopted in the resolution. But ultimately, all of this will culminate in some sort of development proposal that will, and so it's in that document where those things would be codified in terms of what we would be asking for a developer to do. Does that clarify?
I understand what the MOU is. I guess what I'm saying is that there's a piece of this where you're talking about review, green track, draft goals, and metrics for evaluating development proposals. And to me, that's something that the public should be able to weigh in on. And it doesn't have to, like I said, it doesn't have to be hashed out tonight. If it can just be discussed at the MMC at some point, that would be great. And finally, if there are things that are coming forward to the MMC, like the findings from the environmental assessment, is there a way we can get those up on the county, Chapel Hill, and Carborough web pages so that the public can see those as well in a timely fashion?
Yeah, we have a Green Track website that we put everything on as soon as it happens. Everything gets on there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Mark Dorson, and then Randy.
Yeah, so this is partly in follow-up to Jess's question, and I think, first of all, Penny, you should have told our guests that we have coffee and soda and
They've all been back there
candy
already.
and snacks back there that,
They're look at them. They're all.
well, the secret bathroom.
Brought a bunch of candy out for our friends over here. So.
Help yourselves. So, but I wanted to sort of start off with Barbara's question, and then, so just to be clear, this MOU sounds like it's going to be, this governing MOU sounds like it's going to be pretty basic, and the questions like that are in this chart that Jess is pointing out about evaluating the environmental assessment, the development goals, that's going to happen after the MOU is already in place, right? Because the MOU is, as I understand it, is just to determine how we're going to make decisions, right? And so I think we should talk about that now while we're all together, right? So how we do it now, as I understand it, is the managers and the mayors and the chairs meet. They hash out whatever's on the agenda for their meeting, and then they report back to the boards. Hopefully you get some feedback for the next managers and mayor meeting, or MMC, whatever that stands for. And then when there's a decision to be made, right now, all three of the boards have to make the exact same decision, right? We have to act unanimously. And so I just want to know, is this MOU designed to just codify that? Or is there something, I mean, do people think that's the best way to work this? I'm not sure it is, because I feel like, as people have already mentioned, there's been some slippage between what gets decided or resolved or at least agreed to in the small group meeting, and then how the information comes back or what the boards do with it. And so, so I don't know what the answer is, but it seems to me that this document, if all it is designed to do is say, how do we get information? How do we set the agenda? How do we adopt these kind of timelines? And how do we vote? It seems like that could be done fairly quickly, assuming we can agree, right? If we can't agree, if ultimately some of us think everything has to be unanimous and some of us think it can be by a majority or something else, then we should decide, we should get to that decision sooner rather than later, rather than 2 years or something else. And that's one way of doing it, right? Sort of those replicating the model we have now. I mean, but there may be alternative ways to do it. We could appoint a joint green track committee that has representatives from the relative boards that committee has voting authority. Now, and that way, that committee would have to be directed by, would be the representatives of their individual boards. But if we've gotten to this point where we need this MOU because we've recognized that our decision-making process has not been as effective or efficient as we want it to be, then I think we need to really have, hopefully tonight, a little discussion of what people think that should look like. And, again, if the model that you all or that others think works is this mayor's chair model, then I think it needs some tweaking, as my colleagues have already described.
Can I just say one thing?
But I just would like to know that. Having been a chair and been in that process, I found it not very effective. I thought agreements had been reached in those meetings, and then later would find out, no, we were not on the same page,
Right.
or the agreements didn't get back to the boards the way, so what I want to be conscious of, I think all of us do, is moving forward thoughtfully, effectively, efficiently,
And in a way, but in a way that doesn't get the process, like deciding on the process doesn't hang up the substance.
Right.
I mean, what's good is we now have an agenda for an environmental assessment, which is going to come back in June, hopefully. And that's going to be a public document when we get it, and everybody can talk about it. And so I think if the idea is we don't want to have a public meeting formally until we get this governance thing done, it needs to get done by that day, because I think the first big meeting we'll want to have with the community is, what does the assessment say? So I'm opening it up to get feedback from everybody on how you think this thing ought to work. Because I think we ought to at least hear what we're all thinking, to see if there's a chance of, us reaching a unified front.
So I think the slippage issue has been addressed by having our MMC meetings now facilitated. So there is someone that is there that is directing the meetings, taking minutes, and those minutes are going to be pushed out as soon as, it's about a 2-week turnaround that we know that those minutes. So everyone will see what's happening at those meetings and what was agreed to and wasn't agreed to. As far as the public meeting, in our resolution, the first meeting that we said we don't have to wait for the overall MOU to be ready, but we wanted to wait for the assessment to be in and allow the joint staffs to take a look at them before they give a presentation. So it would be a presentation to the community by the joint staffs once they get a chance and an opportunity to look at it. If that needs to change, I mean, we could discuss that here. I agree with you. But that's what's in the resolution right now. So we're not waiting for the overall MOU. We're just waiting for the assessment to come back. And that's also that also was in the notes that we supplied to everybody.
Add that I felt like we did a really good job when we met and working with the facilitator, talking about how we take pragmatic steps on each piece instead of trying to bite up the whole thing at once, so that we can make the progress, that we can get the MOU part can be going on, why the environmental assessment part's going on, and we can take those steps along the way so that we're not waiting in a linear fashion. We're doing all the different things, and that comes together back to the board.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just saying, let's start having the conversation about that MOU, because that's going to, presumably, is going to be hard to hash out, right?
Well, we don't know. We're hoping not, but it may. It may. The 2002 MOU, it was more of like a handshake and everybody was in the kumbaya mode. It also happened before the part of the green tract was in Chapel Hill's jurisdiction. So it wasn't in the ETJ then. So that MOU is really not consistent with what we have now. Randy, you had your hand up next.
Yeah. I guess I'm tagging on to Jess and Mark in a way. My question is the public engagement. If we're starting with a joint, meaning one public information session, what is the minimum of public engagement sessions that could potentially be held? And will they be by jurisdiction, or will they also be joint? What do you anticipate would be a minimum of public engagement separate from public information, the first public information session?
Are you talking just about the environmental assessment now?
No, I mean overall, being able to have public engagement.
Oh, I don't think we're there yet. I think we're just at the, I mean, I don't think we've talked about how many.
On our list to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could talk about that in February, but I don't, we're not there talking, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the point of the assessment yet, and the MOU is just still really fresh, but I think what Mark is asking is a different question than you are, so we can certainly,
Yeah, I would just want to have a feel for, when Jackie talked about check-in, I'm assuming that part of a check-in could engage the public as well.
Yeah. So something that Minister Campbell said to us last Tuesday when we were doing our resolution, and I thought it really struck, and we really should pay attention to that, was that he really did want to hear one voice. He doesn't want to hear 3 different voices, and he talked a little bit more about how the definitions, like one board was talking about environmental study, one was talking about environmental assessment, someone was talking about impact, And he thought that and I take this like an overall feeling that it really should be a unified voice. So as far as, the meetings are concerned, we really do need all of the partners, all of the staffs involved in those meetings with the neighbors and community. Yep, again, I just wanted to see if anyone here. Yeah. Okay, Renee?
So just following up on those points, and I'll start with the community engagement. I think that there should be some mechanisms in place from the beginning on how we engage the community. I mean, they're the ones, it's the community that lives closest to the green tract, and I think that we need to be able to tell them that this is where your input will be. I mean, I know that, folks can email us, talk to us one-on-one and whatever, but I really think that we should continue to engage the community, and there needs to be, defined, not somewhere down the line, but right now. I mean, we can expand on it at any time, but I really think that we need to let them know, just like we've done in many studies in Orange County in the past, whether it's shaping Orange County's future or whatever it may be, the community was there and it was known that they were going to be involved. And my other comment goes to this MOU again. We're waiting for something, and what really is supposed to be the purpose of this MOU? I know it's how we make decisions, but if this thing is dragged out for months, then that means we've got an environmental assessment, and we can't do anything with it other than look at it and I guess make some comments about it. But what really is prompting this MOU? What's the actual purpose?
John, do you want to answer why we need an MOU to move forward?
Trust of different boards, or what? I mean,
I don't know that it's lack of trust. I think it's just a process by which we can go forward. It will. Right now, it's in a very draft form. It's intended to set out the public engagement, joint staff meetings with the public, followed by a public hearing. All of this is subject to change because nobody's really talked about it yet. And it also talks about how to resolve disputes. Right now, we're at this juncture because all three parties under the current system are required to agree to something before it can move forward. And without all three agreeing, it doesn't go anywhere. And it's not gone anywhere for a significant period of time. So this sets out a system, a process whereby disputes can be resolved. And I think that's why we need an MOU, so we can actually move forward with this.
thank you for the clarity.
Yeah, so what are our options for that, right? Either it has to be unanimous consent, or we could vote by the three parties, or we could vote by our relative percentage shares of the ownership, right? Is there some other way of doing it?
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is the way it's written right now, which again, this is a basic draft, hasn't been discussed by anybody. The method I chose to submit to the other attorneys for review is to initially have a meeting of appointed representatives of the three boards and their managers and attorneys to try to work it out. If that doesn't work, bring in a mediator to try to work things through, and this was suggested by Mayor Heminger. And if that does not work, after a lengthy time allowing for that so that people can't just throw up their hands and walk away from mediation, if that doesn't work, then allowing a vote based on ownership percentages. That's the way it's set up right now, and that is very subject to change.
Can I just add, there's some other pieces of this I think we just all need clarification. We had different terminologies for certain things. We weren't sure who should sign like an RFQ. Should it be all three staffs together? Will one be the point person? And so working through just some of the logistics is part of this MOU as well. And then as we get further along the path, then we could take some steps where we can figure out the places we do agree and don't have any issues with, and then spend the time doing the deeper dive into the things we might not agree align, and to make it so that we're working together and understand the steps of where we don't completely have the same terminology, agree that we'll have steps to get there, that we'll have steps to me. And it's, we're doing, yeah, we do. We have a working template like we were talking about, with the water and the sewer and the community center. We have some working templates that have worked out, and we, again, broke it into the pieces we could understand and move through the system with.
Lydia, you want to talk? Anyone else want to talk yet? They have to.
I keep looking around. I don't know.
I have some comments to share, but I don't want to talk over anyone.
Why don't you go, and then we'll have Mark and Hung Bin.
Well, first I was just going to say, this is at once complicated and not complicated. It's not complicated because we all have the goal of affordable housing and, the open space and the connectivity, and we've been working on this for 20 plus years. It's complicated because 3 of us are joint owners of this property, and one of us is the permit issuing authority, and so that makes it a little unusual. It also is a little unusual because the property is located, on the side of Rogers Road that is an ETJ, which isn't, and then Carborough is on the other side, and so this isn't in Carborough. It's in Orange County and it's in Chapel Hill, so it's got a lot of layers. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. We all know that, but that's just going on in my head. But the other thing I wanted to say was, in response to Mark's question, which I think is probably at the heart of the question of the MOU, how do we make decisions going forward? The only example that I can kind of think of where we've had this in recent years, Randy will remember this, but on the SWAG, we had a vote on going forward with the recycling fee. And every jurisdiction had a vote. And we ended up passing a certain amount, 2 to 1, I think it was, of the jurisdictions. And so that's the only recent example I can think of where we had different jurisdictions in the room and we tried to figure out how to break through when we didn't have unanimity.
Okay, so Mark Markopoulos and then Hung Bin.
So on the issue of community engagement, I don't think there's any doubt that we're committed to community engagement. And I would go a step farther and say that we will, when the time comes, do a good job of community engagement. We know how to do that, and we're committed to that process. I think at this point, the best we can say is we will schedule that later. We will have more information to share later, because we don't even know when this process is going to end. So we have very little to say to the public about when and what at this point, right? And I think that we should, based on what we've experienced, just keep it simple with what we've got to do now, which is the environmental assessment, the MOU, and the third thing is the school site, where I could see that being an issue, right? So those are 3 issues that if we can just work through those without anything else distracting us, we've got to get it right this time around. We've got to work together, and we've got to accomplish those 3 things. And once we do that, and the closer we get to the end of it, we can begin to plan for community engagement. But I just don't want to see us try and juggle too many things and get distracted by too much as we try and really recommit to this project.
Hung Bin?
I feel this timeline, I think that it is more process focused. These are the steps that we need to go through. But I would like to see more about what kind of informations that we need to collect. So these key informations that will be crucial for us to, in the end, because in the end we're trying to come up with some development agreement. So I think what are the informations that we need in order to reach to the point that we can agree for the development plan. So for me, I think for our Chapel Hill Town Council, I think we, in the 2 sessions that we discussed, we talked about the importance of environmental assessment. We talk about we need to assess the connectivity, or what kind of connectivity needs to be added to the site, or will be necessary for to connect that development with the rest of the town. So I think the connectivity evaluation or analysis is another piece that the Chapel Hill Town Council requested in our session, last year. And the third piece is we would like to understand what kind of financial commitment will be needed in order to have all those pieces like infrastructure and those things in place and successful development on that site. So for me, those kind of key informations needs to be in place, and they need to be presented to the public, and then we can have a conversation of what can be developed, and then we can have an agreement. I feel these are the key information needs to be in place. From this timeline, so far I haven't seen that at what time point both the decision bodies and the public will be able to access information and how those informations will be discussed, and in the end that help us together to reach some consensus.
Thank you for, we did talk about those things, and I think it's a good thing to come back to the MMC with. We wanted the environmental impact, to see how the environmental impact assessment moved forward with all the boards, because that informs the connectivity piece. We have to know those things to know where we can draw the lines for roads, and to be honest with you, we have to know the school piece too, because that'll play an important key piece for connectivity. So that is one of the steps, and I guess we'll put that on our list. I'm keeping a list of things for us to discuss at the MMC that we can then share back out about how the discussion went and what we hear you about that timeline, about when those pieces will come forward as well. We did agree, and I don't think it was shown on here, we actually did agree that we don't want to be the developers, that we're not planning on building the roads, we're not planning to do that. We're planning on some kind of process that gets us the kinds of housing we want in the places that make sense, and that how we go out to find partnerships to do that, but we weren't planning on being the builders, if that makes any sense. So.
And the MOU guides us gives us the opportunity to guide us on how we move forward to agree on what we're going to do. It's not, the MOU doesn't tell us what kind of development we're going to have, what kind of connectivity we're going to have, what kind of, it doesn't, that's not what an MOU is. An MOU is a legal document that is guiding us on how to move the process forward, how the partners move together forward. So everything that you're talking about will be raised and will be brought up as we get down the road into actually developing the site, even though we are not developing it. But the MOU is just a guideline for us to move forward. If we don't agree on something, how do we move forward past that? And I think that's what Mark Dorson was saying, that he wanted to understand if that's the best way to have these conversations. We're not into the part where we're talking about development yet. We're not even anywhere near that.
So then you're saying that this MOU is just will lay out the decision process, or as the attorney just mentioned, is that just a layout if there is some disagreement among the three decision bodies, how we're going to move forward? Is that?
That's right. The MOU is taking all the partners and it's going to guide us on how we move forward. Nothing is going to be done unless we get all our boards involved and the public involved. That's clear. We all, I think Mark Markopoulos just said that. Nothing is going to be done. This is just a guidance on how the partners move forward together. Amy, and then Damon.
I just wanted to get back to the engagement piece again, and I appreciate that nothing is going to happen until the public comes in. But in what you've laid out on the time schedule, something very important is happening before it gets back to you guys in mid-August, and that's defining those, refining the goals for development and preservation. And I'd really like to see some chance for the public to weigh in there before it comes back to the MMC committee, instead of waiting for you guys to hash everything out, doing all that work, then having to bring it back to council and to other boards. I think if we can have community weighing in at that point, now that brings up some schedule issues because you've got all this happening in August, which is going to be a problem for that. So, you know, I mean, ideally, I know that everybody wants things to move forward. Ideally, if there was some way to get that public involvement before the summertime breaks in June or something, so that staff can then be having it as they're working through the summer months, and then it would be ready to bring back to you guys at your MMC meeting. But I really don't want to see the public seeing all this for the first time when it's formally been decided by the MMC group and is coming back kind of as a done deal.
Yeah, Travis, can you explain what that is? We're talking about number 3, right?
2.
Number 2 and 3.
Two and three, yeah.
I think 3 was also questioned.
Yeah, both of those.
We're talking about this sheet of paper, everyone. The back.
Oh, yeah. So we can, so that process could go any number of different ways. This was, at least from a staff perspective, we thought we would find a way to at least signal that this work has to occur. When that work occurs, who's involved in that work. I mean, we didn't mean to imply anything but to signal that the work has to occur before we can really, you know, make sense out of any sort of development proposal, and so that everybody understands these are the metrics, these are the goals, these are the objectives, in no uncertain terms about what's going to be happening there. So, you know, in fairness to the mayors and the chair, that this was something that we just wanted to signal had to happen. Like I said, it doesn't need to happen in any particular sequence other than before we seek development proposals.
Yeah, and I think as long as it happens in a way where we can get that input in early and get it before there's final decision at the MFC and coming back to us, I think that would be fine.
Okay, Damon, Lydia, and then Mark. You're good? Okay, so Damon and then Karen.
Thanks, Penny.
Oh, I'm
Amy,
sorry, Mark also.
Amy, thanks for raising the question about items 2 and 3 there, because those really are separate activities from the process of developing the MOU and undertaking the environmental assessment. Those are kind of other things that need to be happening at some point. What we really, I think, need to be focused on, and also Hanbin raised a number of really information items we will need at some point in the process down the road when we've gotten, but first we need an MOU, and we also need to complete the environmental assessment. And I guess what I appreciate about Mark's comments was this idea of taking small steps together, seeing where we can get together, and then moving to the next thing once we've reached agreement. So I think that's a good kind of approach to be taking. Jess was asking about that kind of what's going to be in the MOU and what does that mean, and I think Mark raising this question of should we be discussing right here what are the typical or potential approaches to be taking for decision making. And John, thanks for offering up what is in the draft so far. You know, Mark, are you looking for more of a brainstorm here about what other potential approaches there are? Because I appreciated Lydia mentioning the swag example. So that's one example that's been used before. Are there other approaches you had in mind that might be considered by the MMC before they kind of make a recommendation to the boards, or?
Yeah, I was suggesting that this might be more of a brainstorming and see what people think. You know, again, right now we have this unanimous consent requirement. There's inefficiencies in that, but people may think that's the fairest way to do it. And so what I was, so what are the alternatives, right? The swag example is by entity, so there's 3 votes or however many entities there are on there. John mentioned the by percentage of ownership. You know, I think we just need to, so if you think about like we're drafting the Constitution, right? It's going to define how this project gets done. We need to figure out how we're going to sort of deal with the worst-case scenario, which is we can't come to agreement.
And it's your idea that, I mean, it sounds like this draft that John and the other attorneys are working on is going to go to the MMC for some consideration, some discussion, and then maybe is the plan to then come to the individual boards with a recommendation of some kind, or to say, here are the ideas we thought through, here's a process we thought you might be interested in considering, what do you think? And the possibility there is, you know, we all think that's great. Some of us think it's not so great. We go back to the drawing board. It's almost almost like we need an MOU to get the MOU, but we won't go there.
Well, the idea was we could give some feedback
Yeah,
tonight, so
that's
we
right.
don't get in the situation where, as, like Amy just said, the MMC comes up with something, and then it comes down to the boards. I mean, and the boards don't like it, right? And then we're back, we go, and then we have to give them feedback, and then, so we're all together right now in the interest of transparency and candor, and, you know, it would be good if people have a sense of what they think would work, to put that out there now. That's what I was thinking is, again, you know, we're trying to decide how to decide. And so we can wait till the committee does some analysis and makes a recommendation or presents the 5 alternatives or 3 alternatives, and then we could figure out which ones we like, and that will go back. And that's, but we can also say right now, for example, I would say, personally, I don't think we should adopt a MOU that says we all have to agree, because I think that's, that way lies madness. I think that's a hard thing for us to do, and I think we need to, just like we do on all of our own respective boards, when we can't reach agreement, there's some kind of voting process. So I'll offer, if people, I don't know if people want to take up this brainstorm idea.
I do want to do it, but can you hold on a second?
Sure.
And because
Yeah.
Karen didn't get a chance to speak yet, so if we can let Karen speak, and then, if you could just hold that thought, though, because I
Yeah,
think
don't
it's
have to
really
talk
good
anymore.
thoughts.
I think I've made my.
Yeah,
said enough.
so do you want to go before Karen? Did you? Okay, so let's let Karen speak first, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to pick up on Mark's comments around the process, and I think that's where we really need to have our discussion. And I think the MMC process has been a bit frustrating in the past, but I think the recent changes you all have made me much more optimistic about it. And I think that having notes coming back to the boards quickly really helps. I think my understanding is that you all have been meeting sort of as needed, or when you think something needs to be talked about. I mean, I think some of the frustration is, as you've said, when it goes, you guys talk and then goes to boards, then there's disagreement, you have to go back and forth and back and forth. I think there's some ways we could structure it to make that more efficient if you had kind of a set topics and set meeting times, so we know ahead of time what you plan to talk to. You can get input from your boards first, so you come in knowing, kind of trying, not that you can speak for your entire board, but at least I think that'd be more efficient. And maybe making sure we all have very set check-in times with your respective boards, so that nobody's getting too far afoot from what's happening and what decisions are being made. I do think, I agree that unanimity is not working. I'd need to see more about the different options, whether weighted vote or, I think we need more information about that, but we do need to consider that. But I think if we had more of a set schedule for your meetings and agenda items, for instance, number 2 and number 3 on here, if we know you're going to be talking about that in April, then we can all give you input beforehand. And then I think that'll make it more efficient, more transparent, and easier for the public to give input along the way as well, without having sort of formal engagement processes necessarily, but being really open about what's being talked about when.
Mark Markopoulos, and then Lydia, and then Jess, and then if anyone else that didn't speak yet wants to speak before we go back to Mark Dorson's question.
You're suggesting a scenario where somewhere down the line, there might be a 2-to-1 vote, right?
That there might be a disagreement, yeah.
Right. So I think if we step back and think about what we want to do right now, which is the three things, the environmental assessment, the school site, and the MOU, I don't think we get very far if we don't have agreement on those 3 things. I could see at that point, when you start talking about, what color do you want the street signs or whatever, we can have a 2-to-1 vote. If we don't get the memorandum of understanding in the draft environmental assessment in the school district, we're just going to have a memorandum of partial misunderstanding rather than a real MOU, right?
Well, we've already agreed on the environmental assessment. That's all been adopted by everybody.
Well,
So
okay.
and now we have to agree on
The
an
MOU. right, and the
And
school site.
I mean, respectfully, I think the ease with which you think we'll come to a sense on that, I think is overstated.
I'm not suggesting any ease. I'm suggesting if we have one person that doesn't want to be in the one entity that doesn't want to be in the memorandum of understanding, that ain't going to work.
Okay, let's hear from, Lydia, did you want to speak, and then we'll get?
I just wanted to quickly say that it really doesn't make that much of a difference whether it's one vote each or percentage. Because mighty Carborough with 14% is still, even with weighted voting, it's still just basically like 1-1-1, so.
Okay. Jess and then Michael.
I wanted to reiterate that before I think I misspoke maybe, that I didn't mean I don't understand what we're trying to do with the MOU. I think what I'm trying to get clarity on is that we're doing several things at the same time, which is fine. But for number 2 and number 3, what I'm asking for is that those don't just go through, and I think Amy stated it well, that they don't just go through to MMC, come to the boards, and then the public's an afterthought. That was my request there, since those are discrete things that are separate from the MOU. I think in terms of the MOU, we do need to figure out the voting, but I think one of the things that's really held us up that we need to decide on, and this is what Hongbin I think is getting at really nicely, is that we're not agreeing necessarily on what foundational information we need to make decisions. We're not deciding together how do we engage the public in advance. And so I think it's right to do incremental steps, to do a step and then move on. But if we don't, it took us a long time to get to the point where we've all agreed that we needed an environmental analysis as an imposed to an environmental study. So that's taken like 6 months. So if we can agree as part of the MOU what information we need and maybe what information we don't need in order to make decisions and be fully informed, that will really help. And I think that will push us further towards success. And similarly, if we decide what are the ways that we engage the public so that we're all on the same page, so that we understand when the public is going to engage and what we're trying to understand from the public and what questions we're asking them or when we're engaging them along the process, then we won't get hung up every time on when do we engage the public, what are we saying to them, who's talking to them, who's not talking to them, who's talking to them alone, because that's really, I think, getting really muddy. But I think the voting is just one component of how we work together, and if we disagree on what information we need to make choices, then we're not going to get very far. So I think we need to decide, like, to me, the connectivity analysis is pretty critical to know where you want to put things, and certainly understanding where the school goes is really important to understanding all this, and the environmental analysis is critical. So if we can get a sense of where everybody is on what they need before they put up blobs on the map and percentages, then that will really help.
Michael?
So 2 things I wanted to, first in response to Mark's thoughts, basically either we vote unanimously or it's 2-to-1, whether you consider it weighted voting, whether you consider it by entities. There were 2 options, unanimity and 2/3. And I think John has really done a good job of trying to bridge that by saying we start with a hope for unanimity. If we can't get there, then we do some form of mediation, and then if the mediation doesn't work, we revert to 2-to-1. I mean, that's what's laid out now. So I think that actually effectively encompasses both options into one MOU. You start with unanimity. If that doesn't work, ultimately your fallback is 2-to-1. So I think that's actually a pretty good solution, and I'm not sure that there's a lot of other options we can talk about tonight. Number 2 is, I think, what's causing some confusion is what's been done in the Green Track Schedule MOU. It's really conflating 2 processes. So there is the process of figuring out the MOU, what's in it, what are our decision-making processes. What this is also starting to touch on, but has not fully fleshed out, but to me is a separate document, is actually a work plan, right? I think what we're all asking for in different ways is what we need to see is a work plan. So first we do the environmental assessment, then what comes after that? Is it a connectivity analysis, the school site? lay out each of the steps, each of the decision points that we have to work through, and the public engagement process that's associated with each of those decision points. I think if we do that in parallel with the MOU work, then once the MOU work is refined, then the MOU will allow us to make a decision to ratify that work plan in very short order. So I think we've got sort of the basics here. They're just a little bit mushed together, and I think if we break them apart into the two separate components, I think it will allow the staff to proceed on the tracks that the staff needs to proceed on, which is essentially what is the work plan? How, you know, we're at point A now, we want to get to point D or E or F. What are the steps we need to take to get there, while we're also doing the MOU, so when the MOU is done, in relatively short order, we can be in a position to keep doing the next level of work.
Sorry.
Michael, thanks for that. That's helping me think through it, and I appreciate that because I think it does kind of get to what part of what Jess is talking about, right, which is making sure we all understand, as Amy said too, that 2 and 3 there are really this kind of separate piece that is incredibly important to the process we will be engaging in, but what we need now is to figure out the MOU. Staff can be developing their thinking around those 2 items as well, but that's really from some decisions for us to make later on after we've decided how we're making decisions together. The one point, Penny, thanks for giving me one more chance here at the mic, is just I wanted to come back to our very first comment. I think it was from Barbara, appreciating what I think is a more aggressive timeline that some of us were fearing would be at play here. I would like for us to have an MOU agreed upon as soon as we can get one. And if that means we're looking at early fall or whenever that is, whatever the calendar was laying out for us here, that sounds great to me. If we can actually get to that quickly, I think we'd be doing the community a service by doing that.
Thanks. Sally?
So are we to Mark's question again? I guess we are. Michael already went to it.
Yeah, well, Michael made some really good points, so if you want to, yeah.
Yeah, no, just about Mark's question about the how we make decisions and what happens. I think it's not exactly like other votes that we take because we all have real interest in the real estate. So I think that sure, we might not all have to agree on the color of the street signs, but there's something when it comes to like the nature and character of the development that we want on there. I think that we need to be all in agreement, or else we go to mediation, figure it out. Because at that level, we're like 3 adult children who've inherited a piece of land from our parents, and you don't just settle that by 2-to-1 votes. Just don't think that's how that works. The value of the interest at stake.
Are you saying that you think that John is heading in the right direction with what he offered up in the draft of the MOU to the other attorneys? Ty?
I just want to make a quick comment about the jointly planned community meeting. I definitely agree that if the 3 jurisdictions having a joint planned meeting is good, especially to avert confusion from residents hearing different things from different jurisdictions. But if we are going to only have a single opportunity for them to give input at that point in terms of that presentation, is that going to be like recorded and put on the website? Are there ways for them to hear that information if they can't make it to that single meeting other than being there in person?
There'll be more than one meeting. It'll be options, just like when we do presentations for, like if there's a change of transportation, for example, there'll be a number of nights where people can come out and take a look. And the reason why we ask for a little bit more time is so we can actually prepare for it. You know, do we need, what is it that we need to show? Do we need to make new maps? Do we need to have, as the study comes in? So it will be, and again, everything that we do for the Green Track is on the county website. So if the towns want to link to the county website, all our minutes from the MMC, everything is going on to that. So we could just drive everyone to that. But yeah, you're right. There's going to be a number of meetings and a number of ways that people can come and speak. We also, and I know you have, I think all the boards have, if you didn't get an opportunity to come and speak, you can always come to a meeting and you have 3 minutes before every meeting. It doesn't have to be on an agenda to come speak. So if you find something later on that you want to talk about. But there's going to be plenty of public engagement. There is not going to be a lack of public engagement. The concern right now, and I think that's why Mark Dorson is asking, is are we heading in the right direction with the MOU? And I think that the attorneys are waiting for us to give them some direction as well.
So I guess my concern was more about the presentation of those materials, so not just having like the slides on the website, but
No,
the actual,
yeah.
the presentations. And if there are going to be more than one community meetings,
Yep.
could we reflect that in the materials? Because just from all the things that we got, it seems like there's only going to be one.
Just a stab at a schedule. Nothing here is written in stone.
Well, except that we can't have any meetings until the MOU is signed, right? I mean,
No.
it says we're only
No,
allowed-
that's not correct.
That was not right. We took that piece out of all of our resolutions and said, we want to have a joint meeting once we have the information on the environmental assessment. So we changed that wording. That
Right.
was the change in everyone's resolutions.
Resolution, we can get it for you.
Yeah.
And we also
Oh,
said
well, yeah,
that no one jurisdiction could have a meeting
Yeah,
on its
no
own.
one jurisdiction was going to have a special
Right.
meeting for the public until we had the information together.
Okay, but it also says, we jointly agree not to initiate further formal public engagement until completion of the MOU document.
Yeah.
After that one meeting.
Separately.
So it limits us
Yep.
to one formal joint meeting until that MOU is signed.
No, well, that wasn't the intention. The intention was that we would have, when we had meetings about the Green Tract, it would be all of us together instead of individually. So I think maybe we didn't
A
fix the
joint
wording.
formal meeting. We wanted to make sure that we're all together when we have the meetings. And this goes back for years, that when we met with the community and the public, that we wanted to have the joint meeting, meaning all the partners were involved.
Gotcha, okay, so I think the wording is a little bit
Yeah,
unclear. If we can
yeah.
just going forward, make sure we all
Right.
understand what that
And I-
represents.
I know we're running down on time on this time, but I wanted to share a little bit of light about the staff putting in the goals. We talked about this at the MMC, that we all have different environmental restrictions. Carver is actually ended up being the most widest RCD, all those kinds of things. So the staffs wanted to make sure they were all working from the same assumptions, and that was part of these goals. You know, what is the RCD limit? What is the tree canopy? They wanted to be able to have it formalized in the MOU that we will use the most restrictive or the least, whatever that is. That was part of the reasoning on these goals, because there's been some assumptions made that they didn't feel they had the support from all of us in any kind of understanding of what those processes were. Just like environmental assessment versus our environmental impact study versus, and we got into language, but. So I think that was part of talking about the goals and definitions, and the fact that we do want to, that the school site was supposed to be on this. Those kinds of things spelled out as part of that. And I would agree with some of the comments that we all need to agree on the big things together in order to embrace it all together. And then we can really figure out how to do, and it's after mediation, if we don't like the color of the street signs, we can figure out a path forward for that too.
I'm just going to go back. I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to go back to Mark Dorson, even though he's in the bathroom, he can hear us. We have mics in there, no cameras. Are we heading in the right direction? Are we, the speakers? The mic, speakers, sorry.
Just to be clear.
All the time. Does everyone think that or could we get a general consensus? Are we heading in the right direction with the MOU, or as Mark Dorson said, does anyone have anything else to offer while we have all our attorneys in the room on what you want to change? I mean, you haven't seen an MOU, but you know the MOU is a guiding document. Do we want? Mark is talking about voting. Is it unanimous? Because right now that's what it is in 2002. Can you think of anything that you would like to change before? Yes, Damon.
Well, I think Sally's right that it seems like, it's hard to talk about this in
Right.
in the abstract that way, but I mean, I agree with Sally that it seems like the attorneys are in the right direction where they are with the draft, because there aren't really that many options when you come down to it, right, as Michael was saying, right? I guess some of the questions that the MOU might address that we haven't really raised here, but maybe we don't need to, but if there is the sort of worst case scenario where there just can't be agreement, what are the options to each of the partners in terms of divesting their share, for example, or, what are the various remedies for resolving disputes that can't be mediated, that kind of thing. So I just would ask, I don't, we need to answer that now, but just would ask that the attorneys be thinking ahead about those scenarios, because the point of an MOU in part, right, is to deal with worst case scenarios. So just be thinking of that as they draft something for the MMC to look at.
And I think that's right. Alan, yeah.
Yeah, I agree that I think the attorneys are, on the right track. Some trouble I think might come when it comes to part of the MOU. I think the way that John laid it out was that essentially doing a vote, by jurisdiction would be something of last resort. I think we need some clear language about the mediation, how long, should the parties be engaged in mediation, putting some parameters around that might be kind of a sticky spot, but I agree that the attorneys are on the right track.
Well, I would like to say that because this decision, there are so many decision points, like Michael just mentioned. I think that we need a roadmap or some work plan, or whatever the name that we are calling it. I think there needs to be some agreement of what are the informations that need to be collected, or what are the steps that need to go through in order to finally we reach to a point that we can plan for something jointly together. I think without that document, then the decision by itself then just becomes like, in the end, just like we're going to vote. But I think that is not the outcome. Like Sally mentioned, that the goal should always be fostering some kind of consensus. Like in the end, we'll come together. And what are the informations or steps will be needed in order for us to come together? Of course, the MOU, I think maybe that is the final thing that we can resort to if by that in the end we cannot agree on anything, then there is something that there is a pathway that we can reach some kind of outcome. But I think from where we started, I think it has to be that the goal is to reach some consensus, come to a plan that we can all agree together. So I think in order to reach that, I think we need to agree on what are the informations that we think are important, or what are the steps that we need to go through. I feel like the plan that's laid out so far, or this timeline, I have not seen that. I think this planning, a clear vision of what kind of planning process should look like, or what are the steps we should take, what information to collect. I think these things are very important.
Okay, Lydia, and then Joseph.
Yeah, I also wanted just to comment, we're talking about having an exit strategy for if we can't agree, or if we arrive at an impasse. I'd like for the MOU to address, what if a partner just simply wants to get out? Because, frankly, I've said this a few times over the years, Carborough, we have, 14% interest. It's property that's not in Carborough. We spend a lot of time and energy and effort with this wonderful effort, but there might come a point somewhere along the line where we decide it makes more sense for us to voluntarily, kind of get out, and how that agreement would address that, if that ever came to pass, should be a part of it. Jess?
Maybe Hillsborough wants it.
We're going to choose the street sign colors.
Thank God you're here. So I agreed with what Sally said, and then I guess I got a little confused because I thought the MOU draft as it reads now says that there is a weighted vote or a vote of some kind. Is that not true? Or am I losing track of what's happening?
It talks about if there is not an agreement,
Right.
then how do we move forward?
And
so right now it says that all three partners have to agree. So that's why
the currently existing MOU says
and
that. Right.
the new one is going to say that too, unless
Okay.
that's why Mark Dorson was asking, is there a better way? Is there a different way to vote? So we don't
I
get
got
to
you.
that.
I, for some reason, thought that you were saying that it did say there was some sort of waiting now.
Not yet.
Okay, well, then I agree with where it is now, but I do think there should be, if the parties can't agree, what can be done? Can Carborough escape from the from the endless meetings or whatever. I mean, I think that's fine.
We'll just outweigh and make them stay. We'll vote that they can't leave.
Yeah. I think it's a 2-1 vote that Carrboro stays. But yeah, in that case, then I was getting lost, but I think the current MOU track seems reasonable to me.
Renee, and then I want to go back to Mark.
Yeah, I would say that I think that John is on the right track. I would kind of prefer to keep it as simple as possible, and, just feeling how the three boards work together, and then going back to what Michael Parker was saying, having that work plan, which would incorporate some of the comments I think that Hongbin brought up, so that I think if we start putting all the components or elements of our work into the MOU, we will never get anywhere. But if we separate that out and say, okay, the MOU, based on the MOU, we will vote on the work plan and anything else. So I think, the voting, the mediation, that works. But yeah, I guess the only other thing that I was thinking about, and Mark, so when you're talking about unanimity, you're talking about just the three boards. What if were you talking about also if there's division within the boards? Okay.
So Mark, do you feel like the conversation led to some of the answers that you thought we should be having here? Because I mean, you opened up with like, let's talk about this now, and I'm just wondering if this conversation was satisfying to you to get it to where we need to.
Are there 40 people in the room?
No, but I think what Mark was saying was really important, because the lawyers were waiting for us to give them advice, right? That's what they're waiting for, and so they're listening to all of us, and I'm just checking back with Mark to see if that conversation happened.
Well, I'm glad it happened. I mean, I would not be truthful to say I was completely satisfied, but I think, the real thing I was trying to raise is, and I'm not going to talk anymore after this, is the time, right? We've just been working on this for so long. Community's been waiting a long time. The stuff Hongbin you're talking about, the kind of plan, the timeline of everything, we had that. 2 years ago, we worked in the MMC to say, what are the steps to get from where we are today to the first approvals? And it was laid out. The staffs did a great job. And so I'm just thinking about, this MOU could be a way that should include, a recognition that we have an interest in moving this thing forward quickly. Not rushed, not without full community engagement, but, faster than we've been going so far. And so, appreciate Sally's point. It is like, joint tenants, but there's still a process if they can't agree, right? We strive for unanimity, but we need to know what happens. And, really what I was hoping to hear was some more feedback from the rest of my colleagues about what their expectations are. And, obviously I have some frustrations with how the process has gone so far. And since we all want to work together, that's what we're all doing here, is to really get a sense of what other people think. And, one way to figure out how the process should go forward is to look at how it's worked, what's worked well so far, and what has not worked well so far. And so, maybe those conversations have to happen individually, although I think that's not efficient. Yeah. But it's a good start, and I appreciate everyone leaning in.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda item, and the mayor of Hillsborough is going to take this over, and this is Orange County Complete Count Committee, status and efforts for the 2020 census, and it's all yours.
Starting with the presentation.
Todd McGee.
So good evening, mayors, chair, councilors, commissioners. Hope I got everybody. My name is Todd McGee. I'm the Community Relations Director for Orange County, and I'm a member of the Orange County Complete Count Committee. And we have quite a few of our members here tonight. If they want to raise their hand, I'll let them right now, but members up here and then the audience as well. I have some in the back here. So thank you all for coming. So we're going to talk a little bit about the census. It's 2020, so we know what that means. So what is at stake for Orange County and North Carolina? A political representation, federal funding, and then community planning and economic development. So political representation, North Carolina is one of 6 states that are projected to gain a seat based on the data from the 2020 census in Congress. Along with Oregon, Colorado, and Arizona, Florida is projected to pick up 2 seats, and Texas is projected to gain 3 seats. And if you look at that map, it really kind of shows the population migration in the country. It's going south and west a little bit. And one thing I learned today that was very interesting is that in 2000, when we picked up our last seat, we did so by less than 1,000 people. So that shows you how important getting an accurate count is. If we're projected to get a seat, I would hate for us to come up 1,000 people short this year because we didn't get out the right count. Federal funding, it's $675 billion a year is divvied up based on census data. This is money that goes to schools, transportation, roads, social services. Each person counted in North Carolina is about $1,600 in federal funding and $200 in state funding. So put another way, each person not counted in North Carolina costs us, or is a lost opportunity to get $1,800 in federal and state funding. So that's why, again, it's very important. And then the last thing is the data is used by businesses to determine where they want to expand and locate. They want to go where the people are. The local governments also use the data for planning purposes. When we see that lots of people are coming into a certain region, that causes us to think we need more infrastructure there. That could be schools, roads, whatnot. So the data is very useful as well for a variety of reasons. So what is new in 2020? Online response. For the first time, you'll be able to fill out your census on your phone if you want to, but you'll be able to do it online. You'll also be able to call in and give somebody over the phone your answers to your census questions. So if you're a person who doesn't have a computer, you don't want to wait and get the paper form, you can call somebody, and they will take your information over the phone. The census is making information available in 12 languages, and the Census Bureau made a concerted effort this year to hire more dual language enumerators as a representation that our country truly is a melting pot. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what the process will be from the Census Bureau. Middle of March, your invitation will be mailed. It's going to look like this. It'll be a letter. It will not have your name on it. Tammy Grubb told me today that she had gotten a letter that looks like it's from the Census Bureau. It's got a form on it. It asks you to fill out all your information, and then at the bottom, it asks you to contribute to President Donald Trump's campaign. That is not the Census Bureau. And one of the tip-offs is that it came to her address. The Census Bureau will not have your name on it. It came to her name. The Census Bureau will not have your name on it. It is sent to the address. So if you get any mailing from what looks like the Census Bureau that has your name on it, that is not from the Census Bureau. So just keep that in mind. That is a little disturbing that that is happening. March 16, so the first invitation will go out middle of March. The next one will come out about a week later. You're going to get both of these. So even if you get your first letter, go online and fill it out, you're going to get the follow-up letter. They've already printed those. They've already got them ready to go. There's nothing they can do to stop that follow-up letter from coming. So if you get it the first time you fill it out and you get it the follow-up letter, that doesn't mean you didn't successfully fill it out. It just means they had already sent it, and there's nothing they could do to stop it. But if you haven't filled it out by, say, the middle of March, a couple of weeks later, you are going to get another reminder postcard. Again, first week in April, if you still haven't filled it out, they're going to send you another reminder, and this time they're going to include the paper questionnaire. Because at this point, they're going to assume maybe you're having trouble doing the online version or calling, so you're going to get the old-style paper questionnaire. Then at the end of April, if you still haven't filled it out, you're going to get one more reminder to go online and fill it out or fill out your form. Then the census takers start showing up in late April, early May. So if you don't want people coming knocking at your door, get that form filled out before the end of April. So most of the people in Orange County are going to get the initial letter, which will just be that letter I showed you. However, there is one census tract in Chapel Hill. They have identified by tract areas that they think are not going to be likely to respond online, and they're going to go ahead and mail those people the paper form right away. And there's one census tract in Chapel Hill that is going to get that form right away, and I guess I missed that slide. So anyway, so what are the challenges we're facing? The digital divide obviously is a big one. There are areas in the county that don't have really good internet access. In the southwestern, northeastern parts of the county don't have really good internet high-speed access. Another challenge is going to be our hard-to-count communities. We'll talk about them a little bit more. And then another challenge is inadequate and late funding. So in North Carolina, the state legislature, the governor's budget had $1.5 million, not a lot. The legislature took that out. The governor vetoed the legislature's budget, and now we're at an impasse. And so I don't think there's much chance that the state is going to be chipping in any money to the census efforts, considering the General Assembly doesn't come back into session now until late April, and we'll pretty much be done by then. So I don't think we can count on any money from the state. Just as an FYI, that's not totally unusual. I saw an article that said there were about half the states had actually committed money and half had not. In the South, a lot of the states have not put up money. So I'm not sure why that is, because we're where the people are going to. You'd think we would want the accurate count. California, just as an example, is putting up $187 million of state funding to get out the count effort. So there's that track that's missing. So you can see it. It's down there right in the corner, southern corner of the county in Chapel Hill. So Orange County has created a complete count committee. So as I said, a lot of members are on that here tonight. That's led by Vice Chair Renee Price over there. Some of the partners that we have on it are Stacy Carles. She's the Executive Director of the NC Counts Coalition. They're a statewide nonprofit type agency that is trying to raise awareness of the census. Bob Coates is the Governor's Census Liaison. He came to speak to one of our early meetings. He's been, I believe this was his 4th census he said he was going through, Renee. So he was a wealth of information. And then Eric Edelheit is the Census Bureau's local representative for Orange County. He also serves Durham County and I believe Chatham County and Pershing County, I think. So he serves multiple counties. So this is a map, just as an FYI, of all the complete count committees across the country. And then here's a map of all the ones in North Carolina. So you can see the state is taking it seriously. I should say the local governments in North Carolina are taking it seriously. The state government may not have taken it seriously, but we're forming these committees and we're trying to do what we can to get out the count. So what is the role of the Complete Count Committee? So our primary goal is to promote awareness of the census. We want people to know what the census is, why it's important, and that they should respond to it. So our goal also is to encourage participation. We want to identify the hard-to-reach communities within our county. That's not the same from county to county or state to state. And then in those communities, we want to work with the trusted leaders to help spread the word about the census. So one of the strategies that Bob Coates gave us, that Stacy Carles gave us, that everybody we've talked to says that the effective strategy is to get the community leaders in those communities to be the ones to deliver your message. No offense to anybody around the table, but when those groups see government people coming, they don't necessarily trust what we're saying. But if they do see somebody that's a trusted leader in their local community, they're more likely to listen to what they say and to believe what they say. So we're working with El Centro, the Refugee Partnership, and some other organizations to identify who these people are and use them to help spread the message of those trusted leaders in those communities. So the Complete Count Committee was divided up into a lot of subcommittees. I won't go over all 3 of them, but we're going to highlight a couple of them here for you. The Be Counted sites, this is one of the strategies that we came up with to address the digital divide, because as we said, not everybody has good high-speed internet access. So these Be Counted sites are places where there are public computers available that people can go in and bring their letter with them, log into the census website, and fill out their information there. Now, the census has suggestions and requirements on how we run these things. They ask that they be non-staffed, that they're self-service computers. They don't want someone to be sitting there waiting for a resident to come in and offer to help them out, say, here's where it is, let me log you in, do all this stuff, because the census is really trying to emphasize the privacy of the data of the people who are filling out the form. And if there's somebody there looking over their shoulder, offering to help, offering to fill out, take their form, and, log into the website for them. All of a sudden, that privacy guarantee is gone. All census employees take an oath. They promise never to release the information. If they do, they can be held criminally liable and be sent to jail. None of us have taken that oath, so that's why the Census Bureau really wants it to be a hands-off approach. And then what we're asking for all of these sites is for them to have these computers available during their regular business hours, not like a specific time, say 12 to 2, you can use this computer to do the census, but the rest of the day it's for the public to do whatever they want. So those are kind of the Be Counted sites. And here is a map of where we have them so far. Have them in libraries, community centers, the Orange County Senior Centers. We have them in Rogers Road. Hillsborough Town Hall is going to do it. Durham Technical College Library is going to do it. So we've got them kind of clustered around where the population centers are. But you can see there's a couple of areas in the lower left of the county and the upper part of the county that we don't have places there yet. So what we're trying to do with those areas is what we call a pop-up site. So Commissioner Markopoulos gave us a great suggestion. Bravos in the southwestern part of the county is a place where a lot of people come. We're going to work with the owner there. Mr. Markopoulos is going to reach out for them, see if we can't put up some computers there, maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays in April, have information about the census displayed there all throughout the month. The great thing about that is that's one of those hard-to-reach communities that we're trying to reach too, the Hispanic population. And he's a leader in that community. So if we can get him to get on board and show us these, display this information, we can set up some computers there once or twice during the month of April. We think that'll help us reach those folks in that area. We're also looking up at the Grange in the northern part of the county to maybe do the same thing, have a couple of Saturdays where we go up there, set up some computers, and then let people know that they can come if they haven't done their census, they can come here and fill it out. One of the things to note about the Be Counted sites as a difference from 2010, when they did it before the last time, they actually had Census Bureau employees staffing these Be Counted sites. So you could come in and get help filling out your form and ask questions. This year, we're not going to have that, but what we will have is that every site is information in foreign languages, information on what to do if you have a question. There's a phone banks that the Census Bureau is going to have. We'll instruct the employees at these locations. If somebody comes up to you and asks you a question about the census, you need to direct them to the phone information that will be by the computer, and that's where they need to call. And they can call those numbers and get whatever questions they have answered, because they will be talking to Census Bureau. We don't want to put our local government employees in the position of answering a question that they don't know the answer to. And I know that people who work in our libraries and our senior centers want to be helpful, want to try to help citizens out when they ask a question, and the risk that they could provide a false answer to a question is just too high, and we don't want to put them in that position to tell somebody, I can't help you, but here's where we do want to put them in the position that I personally can't help you, but here's where you need to go to get the information. So that's what our goal with those will be. But that is a difference between the last time. So the hard-to-count communities, as I said, our strategy, we've identified 4 of those kind of groups in this county: the homeless, the non-English speaking, college students, and then this one surprised me, young children. It's estimated that nearly 1 million children under the age of 5 were not counted in the 2010 census. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I think the most common reasons that we've read about is children who live with parents in 2 different locations. Neither parent puts them on their form because they think the other one has done it. Or probably the most common one is that you have an extended family in a home. So you have a mother, her child, a grandchild. You may have a niece and her child living in there. And so the mother or the head of the household, whoever that is, gets the census card and thinks, well, I just need to count my direct family members. I don't need to count my grandchild because my daughter will also get a census mailer and she'll count the child. Well, the fact is that the address gets the census mailer. So anybody who's living in that home, regardless of whether or not they're related to you or not, needs to go onto your census form. So that's where a lot of the kids are not counted in that way as well. So counting the homeless, people experiencing homeless have likely been undercounted for decades. That's just a fact. There are a number of ways that the 2020 census is going to try to reach out to these folks. They began, the primary operations for counting people experiencing homeless is the service-based enumeration, which is part of the broader group quarters operation. So in March, late March, early April through April 1st, the Census Bureau employees will be going out to known locations where the homeless people tend to gather and try to meet them and conduct interviews face-to-face and fill out the paper form for them. So again, they will be going out and with paper forms and encountering the homeless folks and trying to get their information that way. So they will also, the Census Bureau in the fall began identifying areas, what they call transitory locations. These could be shelters, these could be hotels where people who are experiencing homeless temporarily are just staying. They could be campgrounds, they could be encampments, those kinds of things. So then in the fall, they were trying to identify those. And then again, in April, after this April 1 deadline, in the end of April, they will be going to those areas and trying to count those folks as well. So they're going to make a concerted effort to really reach out and get the homeless folks counted this year. For non-English speaking, the Census Bureau this year is making information available in 12 languages. And again, we talked about the trusted community leaders. And then we're also going to be using our schools to try to target information through the kids to take home to the parents, because in a lot of these families, we find the children speak English, the parents do not. So we're going to try to work with the kids to get that information. And I do have Joel Brown, who is here from Chapel Hill Schools, if she wanted to. If you have any questions about what the school is doing, I will defer that to her. So, and then here's a list of the languages that the Census Bureau is creating documents in: Arabic, Chinese, both Mandarin and Cantonese, French, Haitian Creole, Japanese, Korean, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. Now, our Family Success Alliance, we deal with a lot of people who don't speak English, and we have a translation service at our offices, and people come in and use the translation service to speak to the folks behind the counter. And they have identified 3 languages in Orange County that are actually more common than most of the languages you see on this list. And those are Burmese, Karen, and Swahili. I won't try to pronounce the official word. So we're going to, the Complete Count Committee is going to translate some of the materials from the Census Bureau into those languages and then have those available at all of the Be Counted sites and the pop-up sites as well. Again, the Census Bureau is not going to help us with that, so we're going to do that ourselves. And then the group quarters, I know there was a question about how are the students at UNC counted, and we do have a state prison here on Orange County. How are those folks going to be counted? Those will come under the group quarters. If you live in a dorm at UNC, you will not get a census form. The university will provide all of that data to the Census Bureau. Same with the prison. If you're an inmate in the prison, the State Prison Bureau on April 1st will take a census of the population there, and they will provide that data to the Census Bureau. So Census Bureau will not be going into the prison on April 1st and trying to count folks. The state will provide that information, and then the UNC will provide the information for the students who live in the dorms. Now, the off-campus students, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. I know if I had been in college and living in an apartment with 4 other people like I was, and a piece of mail came from the Census Bureau, I would assume my parents are going to count me on theirs and throw it away. Yes.
So I talked with UNC yesterday, and they're ready to help spread the message to all UNC students and explain that differential, but they were waiting to get the information. I said we were having this tonight. They're waiting to get the information from us about what we'd like to share and how important it is, and they're happy to broadcast it.
And I've been compiling, so the Census Bureau has all this information, so I've tried to compile a list of documents that I'm going to email to Kristen this week, and I say, here's what you can do and help us out, and then anything else you need from us, let us know. But yeah, we're going to really rely on, and they are members of the Complete Count Committee, and we're going to really rely on them to help communicate that to the college students, particularly the off-campus ones. I'm not concerned about the kids on campus because UNC will take care of that. But again, like I said, fortunately, I started college in 1981, so I missed the 1980 census. But if I had been in college living in an apartment with 5 other guys like I was at one point, I can pretty much guarantee you we wouldn't have filled out that census form. we probably wouldn't have even opened it. So I think that's going to be an issue. Any help UNC can give us there will be good. We've talked about doing things like putting stickers on pizza boxes and just reminding college kids, this is census month, fill out your census form. And then just quickly here, last slide, outreach strategies. We have created census captains. Those are volunteers that are in the community who will help us share these tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, newsletter articles, short newsletter articles that we've written for them. If they have newsletters that send out to their neighborhood listservs, those kinds of things, Nextdoor, things like that. We have PSAs running on WCHL, WHUP. We're going to reach out to WCOM, get them on there as well. Commissioner Price and the members of the elected officials who are in our subcommittee are kind of our census ambassadors. We're trying to get them as many speaking engagements to groups around the county as we can. We're scheduling a series of April 1 kickoff events, which is April 1 is Census Day. So we're going to try to have 2 or 3, maybe 4 events at various locations throughout the county on that day. We'll be asking probably the mayors and the chairs to come and speak about the importance of the census. And then one thing that I would like to ask all of y'all here is to agree to be a census captain so I can send y'all the information, the tweets and the Facebook posts and things like that y'all can just share on your social media feeds. I went and did some research yesterday. All the folks that I could find in this room that are on Twitter, and that's almost all of you, have a combined 21,000 followers. So that's a significant number. And remember, we're not trying to reach every person in Orange County. We're trying to reach every household in Orange County. So that's a significant number of those households that y'all can reach. And that doesn't include your Facebook and Instagram, and if you have websites and if you have newsletters, other ways you can get information out for us. So if y'all don't object, I'm going to go to your town websites and the county website, add all of y'all's emails to the census captain's email, and y'all will start getting, and it's not every day. We'll be sending you something probably every 2 or 3 weeks with just sample posts that we can ask y'all to share on your own term. Because again, y'all are the leaders in the community, and we do want y'all to, the public to see that y'all are supporting this effort as well. So unless somebody objects to that, I'm going to add everybody to it. If you do object, you don't have to say it now. You can come see me afterwards. But if you have a different email you'd like to use too, other than what's on your town website, let me know that too as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Let's get around to questions. I see we have.
Joel Brown is here. He was going to talk about the school census in the school.
Joel, do you want to do you have something you want to present, or do you just want to be available?
I'm just available.
Awesome.
I'll be very brief. One of the things the schools are doing is they're working, both school systems are working together. Cedar Ridge High School video group, they're doing a video emphasizing child nutrition, which will be another PSA, and Carborough and I think Hillsborough are working with that group in order to do that PSA, and it will be out and on the website when it is completed.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. Okay, I saw Jackie and Kathleen and Sally. Did you have your hand? Okay. And Ellen.
Thank you, Todd. It looks like you all are doing an amazing job of this, and we appreciate it. Given the current climate in our country, how are we assuring people? Are people scared that talking to census will lead to ICE being at their door? And if so, what do we do about that? And how do we, one, make sure that when we tell people, no, that's not going to happen, that we're telling the truth? And two, how's that message getting out to people?
So the security is one of the messages that we are highlighting. In fact, I believe February, that is going to be kind of the theme for the communications we send out the month of February. We will have cards at every one of the B counted sites that explain the steps the Census Bureau is taking to ensure the data. The data cannot be shared, I believe it's 72 years. But again, I mean, if you look back at our history, they used census data in 1940 to find the Japanese Americans. So it's not like it hasn't been done before. One of the things that the committee made a conscious decision, because we started meeting last May, I believe it was, May or June. That was right at the height of the time that the administration was trying to get the citizenship question on the form. So we made the conscious decision to go dark until about now, and then really start trying to bring it back up and try to get as much distance between that debate and argument as we can before we start promoting the census. Commissioner Price, did you want to add something to that?
We also made a very conscious effort to get people from the Latinx communities or any other, communities to be involved on our committee so that they would be the trusted messengers in going back into the community and saying this is safe. And that's why even with the recruiting of census workers, the enumerators, that's why and Todd talked about, those trusted leaders in the communities, they're the ones that we hope will take the message, to next door, to their next door neighbors and all, because we know that's very real. One of the biggest things, almost in any census, has been trust, and not just with the Latinx community now, but through time. I mean, it's been that way even with African Americans and Native Americans. So that's why we're focusing on those trusted messengers.
Good. Thank you.
Oh, good. All I was going to speak to is actually the point that Jackie which was to use this forum to emphasize the confidentiality. It is the confidentiality laws that were passed since 1940. They did not have the protections in 1940, but it is 72 years, and it is locked down. While there's a lot of incorrect information going out, it is very locked down, and the penalties of the census employees are draconian. So I just wanted to use this to just
Yeah, they take an oath of office, and they can, and will face criminal.
It's a $5,000 fine plus jail time.
Yeah, if they breach if they share somebody's data.
So does that apply to Trump?
I'm sorry, $250,000 fine plus jail time.
Yeah. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, so Kathleen and I were both at the Triangle J meeting last week when Bob Coates gave a presentation very similar to this one, and that's where we learned that about the 72 years and the fines. A couple of things I just want to add is, one is that he said that Orange County is only 40 to 60% toward reaching its recruitment goal for census workers, and that's compared to Durham and Wake that are at like 80%. So that's concerning. And for everyone watching this, if you're interested in being a census worker, you can go to 2020census.gov/jobs and apply online. They pay at least $13.50 an hour plus gas and other expenses. So if you need a part-time job in the near future, that's an option. Can I just finish? Yeah. Then the other thing I wanted to point out was that when you said that someone had received some information already, Mr. Coates said to emphasize that the census will not ask for your, not only will they not put your name on there, they will not ask for your Social Security number, they will not ask for credit cards, they will not ask for donations or anything on behalf of a political party. And he said all those things have already happened in North Carolina. So then the other thing is for when people don't respond to the online or the mail and a census worker comes to your door, they will be well identified with big backpacks or packs that say Census 2020 on them, and they'll have official government IDs, et cetera, so you should be able to recognize them.
Correct.
Just want to add something.
Alan, then Lydia, then Penny, then Matt.
Yeah, this is tied into what Sally was saying about the potential risks that are out there, especially when mailings that are purported to be from the U.S. Census are sent out that actually are not from the U.S. Census. I was going to ask about, what kind of, if there are any kind of information campaigns around that to, arm folks with, knowledge about what to look for so that they can, best guard themselves and their resources.
Correct. So what we had planned, once we get closer to the date that the letter was going to be in, we were going to start showing the sample letter. Here's what it's going to look like. So when you see this, don't throw it away. This is the first that I'd heard of this issue about the false mailings coming out now. So I think we're probably going to go back and work up some messaging to let folks know that this is going on. And I think the telltale sign is if you get a letter that's addressed to you, it's not from the Census Bureau. And if you get a phone call, it's not from the Census Bureau. They're not going to call folks and ask you for your information. And in fact, one of the things that we learned for the Complete Count Committee, we had talked about, well, could we, set up a phone bank and just call folks and encourage them to answer the census when they get it. That's actually against federal law, too. You cannot call folks on behalf of the census. So we can't do that. But yeah, I think, again, as these scams become known, we're going to do as much as we can to shed light on them so folks won't fall for them, because that's, it's disappointing that that is happening, but unfortunately, that's where we are.
Yeah, I also heard Mr. Coates at a presentation. He must be making the rounds. But I wanted to tell folks that I actually have an article from the Brennan Center for Justice that outlines those specific federal laws that protect census confidentiality, because I've actually had a lot of people ask me about that. And, and they are really tight laws. But if anyone wants this, just let me know and I'll email it to you.
And so, Todd, I'm a little concerned about if we go out into the northern part of the county, are we going to have reliable broadband to make sure that we can do this?
Yes, we're going to bring some of the hotspots that the library has that are, those little mobile Wi-Fi sets. So, yeah, we'll have those, yeah.
Okay,
we'll make sure that works.
Great, thank you.
So the one thing that I want to highlight also is the legislature's finite wisdom in not funding the census. And I know that the county has a placeholder budget for getting things out there, and I did want to highlight that the Hillsborough Town Board has committed at least $5,000 in matching funds. If the county matches that could go towards publicity efforts, and I would really encourage our other partners to consider doing the same. I think when we did the bond referendum in 2016, I think that information campaign was anywhere from like 30 to 50,000. I think I remember, and that was for a one-time payout of $125 million. And this is a payout from federal and state of $240 million every year. So I think that is something that's well worth the investment to get the word out.
Thank you. Yes, and that was one of the points I wanted to make, was to encourage all of y'all to go back and see if there's a way to support us through some additional resources. So thank you for that.
Matt, okay, next we have Susan, then Sammy, then Renee.
Todd, I appreciate all the work you're doing on this. I had a question. You were talking about how complicated it can be as people go to report the number of people in their households. And tell me a little bit about the instructions that will be provided to them, where they'll appear, and...
So I can't really speak into a lot of depth about that. There's 10 questions on the census. They're going to ask, one of them is, do you own your home or not? They're going to ask for all the people who are living there and their ages. I don't think they ask for social security numbers. They're going to ask for the relationships. They're going to ask for racial demographics, ages, so those kinds of things. So I looked at the sample form online, and I can send that to y'all as well if you'd like to look at it. It's not terribly complicated. I think that I even included in the handouts here. It's not terribly complicated, but it will take some time. And the issue, I think the biggest issue is folks just not knowing, in those blended families, not understanding that this is not addressed to you as a family member. This is addressed to you as the household. So that's going to be, I think, the biggest issue.
Would you expect sort of a typical person filling out their census? How long would you guess that would take?
I'd hate to hazard a guess. I don't think, it's not going to be as long as doing your income taxes. I have 4 kids, and I looked at the form, and I think I could do it in like 10 or 15 minutes. I don't think it's terribly complex.
The form is in the, it's in the...
Is it in the packet? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought I included that. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think filling out the form is going to be complicated. I think it's convincing people of the need to fill out the form, and then that they need to include everybody that's in their house, not just direct family members.
Sammy.
Thanks. Thanks, Matt. When you were pointing out as what I'm building off of, for comparison, you mentioned California is investing about $187 million, and I did a little analysis per capita, it's $4.7 per person. So just to put into perspective, we should really be thinking about making up that difference locally, as it is a good investment for money that gets back. So I will be encouraging our board to have that kind of perspective of a progressive state and what they're investing in recognition of the amount that we could get back.
Thank you. I looked at so the North Carolina's 1.5 million that they were going to put in is 14 cents a person. So even with that, it was still one of the lowest per capita rates in the country. But again, like I said, half the states didn't do anything. So we're not the only one, but it would have been nice to have seen a little better leadership on that from the state level.
Renee?
Okay, so a couple things. On the jobs, I do know that people have applied and they just haven't heard back. So a lot of that is on the part of the Census Bureau itself, and I know they had sessions, I know at RENA, where they were taking applications, so I think some of that is on their side. Though we can continue to, well, I was trying to find it online. We've got it posted online, yeah.
Yes, it's online, and we've put it on social media. Our DSS has the information about the jobs and their locations as well, so they're going to try to get folks as well.
And then on some of those, the confidentiality and the false letters and all that, there also has been false letters going out stating that, beware, there are people going around the neighborhood posing as census workers, but they're not census workers. Well, that whole letter, that's a scare letter, and it's a scam, and I checked it with the sheriff. That was actually about a month or so ago. It may have died down, but it could pop up again. But census workers will have identification on them, and really, we know when they're going to be out in the field. Now, I was rather nervous about the fact that they had people out there doing address verification and without much notice, but if anyone is suspicious about anything that they get regarding the census, just call the county or call the towns or even call the sheriff's department. As far as the allocation, I know we had put $1,500 in our budget in June, and then I talked to the manager after Matt had to say something about Hillsborough, what he was going to ask. So the manager, if it's okay with the rest of the board, we'll put in at least another $500 to make it $7,500 at least to start.
And we can spend it. We can spend it.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to understand that, well, first of all, you can fill out, as soon as you get the letter, you can go online and fill it. You don't have to wait till April 1 to fill out your census form. The other thing, though, that that people need to understand is that if people are getting ready to move or are in transition, it's where you live, where you are residing on April 1st. If you're on campus on April 1st, that's your residence. It's not where you're going to be, a month and a half when you go home for the summer. It's where you live on April, or where you're residing on April 1st. And the other thing on the languages, on the slide had a number of languages, but there are about 60 languages that are on the census website. And I think it was Bob Coates that told us, or it might have been Eric, that if there is a language that isn't available, if it's not one of our 12 or the ones that are on the site, you can actually call the Census Bureau, and they've got, the way they have it set up is, I guess it's like the UN, in that they will patch you through to someone that speaks whatever language that may be. So they have over 100 languages that they're prepared to communicate.
So I just want to make a note that we are at time for this item, and I know we have a lot of other things to discuss. So Sally, I see you have your hand, and then after that, maybe we can wrap this up.
Very quick, since Renee mentioned calling about if you have concerns, I do have the official hotline number is 1-800-424-6974. So thank you.
Thank you, Sally. And thank you again, Todd, for this thorough presentation, and thank you to the Complete Count Committee. Y'all have done a ton of work. And Renee, that's a lot of people to manage, so I just appreciate all the work that has gone into that. The mayors and the chair just filmed some award-winning videos trying to encourage people to be counted for all the jurisdictions. And I will just note that the late, great Shirley Chisholm, as a member of Congress, also worked as a census worker to be sure everyone in her district was counted. So anyone who has extra time,
Thank you.
take care. And I will turn that, who's up next? All right, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
And just to assure town council members from Chapel Hill, we are looking at a budget amendment for census as well. We're waiting to hear what amounts. So do that. All right. Woo-hoo. All right, the next item up is an update on the county's emergency response time and co-location efforts. This concerns all of this. EMS is something we all use. The county helps coordinate, and we haven't had an update in a very long time, so there's some good news in here and some information to learn.
Good evening, all of my esteemed leaders. That's easier. My name is Dinah Jeffries, and I'm the Emergency Services Director for Orange County. I'm also from Alamance County, North Carolina, the baby of 9 children. So I know how it is to fight. We are very honored this evening to come before you. We thank you for allowing us to share a little piece of our world with you. Tonight, we're going to focus on 2 main issues. One is our EMS times in relationship to the University of North Carolina Hillsborough Hospital. The second one is how are the co-locations going? And we'd like to talk about that at the end for just a little bit. I also have with me my division chief, Kim Woodward, and she is the manager of EMS operations. I'm going to have her step forward and shine with her division, and we will both be available to answer any questions afterwards.
Good evening, esteemed leaders. I definitely had to move that down just a little bit. So let's make sure I'm running this. Okay. So just to give you guys a little background on EMS, and this, some of this will be in fiscal year, so we'll kind of go back and forth with some dates here. In fiscal year current, this is the most current data we have. This fiscal year, we have run 9,033 calls as of January 17th. Our projected outlook for the fiscal year of 1920 is to run 16,500 calls. In that same time frame, in this fiscal year, as of January 17th, we've had to utilize mutual aid resources into our county 208 times because we didn't have a unit available because they were either at the hospital tied up or they were on another EMS response. In 2019, this is a calendar year from January 1 to December 31st of 2019, we transported 1,254 patients to UNC Hillsborough. And we'll talk a little bit about this further, but keep in mind, and this is kind of exciting for us, we like this number, our turnaround time at UNC Hillsborough is 26 minutes and 29 seconds. That's from the time we get to the hospital to the time we drop off the patient and clear and get back into service. And I'm going to drop a hospital name here. Our longest turnaround time is 37 minutes and 53 seconds, and that's Duke University. This slide shows our call volume by location, and it somewhat surprised folks in our own division. When you look at our highest call volume, it's of course the town of Chapel Hill, our highest population center, but our second highest call volume is actually the town of Hillsborough. And our third highest call volume is the town of Carborough, and then our townships sort of round out the rest of our call volume. We continuously move our ambulances from one side of the county to the other side of the county. Our geography, the county is split into 2 for EMS by I-40 and I-85. And so when we run out of units north of I-40, we'll send a south side ambulance up to cover the north side. When we run out of units south side, we do the same thing. We send a north side unit southward. We do this in partnership with South Orange Rescue Squad. As you can see, we have run, Orange County Emergency Services ran move-ups 995 times so far in this fiscal year. South Orange has augmented that by moving up for us 43 times. So that's a total of 1,038 times that we've had to move an ambulance to cover an area. Our EMS standbys. Actually, let me go back for 1 second about those move-ups. We thought about this today, and UNC Hillsboro's position in the county, when we clear up from UNC Hillsboro, we are less than 5 minutes in either direction from our north side and our south side move-up locations. So that hospital's location is extraordinarily strategic. Our EMS standbys, these are times when we have to dedicate an ambulance, either planned or not planned. The unplanned events may be demonstrations down on our campus. They may be fire assists where we stand by and protect our firefighter partners. Those total 285 times this fiscal year so far. And South Orange has augmented that by providing 70 of those standbys. It's important to also note that when we are on those standbys, that does take an ambulance out of service or out of district. And when that happens, that just decreases the number of available ambulances we have in the system. Response time is absolutely dependent on the number of available ambulances that you have in your system, plus the proximity of those ambulances to the request. So again, we go back to the 208 times this year that there wasn't an ambulance available in Orange County. And you can see those mutual aid resources that we've utilized. So clearly Durham and Alamance are our top partners in providing mutual aid resources. It is also important to note that we too provide mutual aid into these co-located counties. So we do that as well. So to conclude, it's very difficult for us to say definitively how UNC Hospitals has affected our response time. There's so many competing factors in that determination. However, what we can say is that we do have a very quick turnaround time at that hospital, and it is strategically placed almost in the center of our county. So once we do get out of that hospital, we're available for a call immediately, and a lot of times we're available for our move-up locations. Our ambulances absolutely clear faster from each of those calls. Just this week, we had 3 ambulances stacked at UNC Hillsboro, and we heard those ambulances clear up one right after the other, and it was very fast. The opening of UNC Hillsboro allowed many of the northern Orange County patients who would have otherwise been transported to Duke or UNC main campus. They can now go to a closer location where our ambulances can turn around faster. Any questions about UNC Hillsboro? Okay, we'll keep going. So an issue that we're extremely proud of is our EMS co-locations. When we talk about EMS being our Orange County being the single EMS provider, that means that counties are responsible for the provision of EMS coverage. Our EMS system includes all of our fire department first responders, our 911 EMD telecommunicators, our South Orange Rescue Squad partners, and Orange County Emergency Services. Orange County Emergency Services is the only advanced life support entity in Orange County. All of this system provides coverage across the entire county. As we showed earlier, our highest call volume is in Chapel Hill, followed by Hillsboro, and then Carborough. We have 6 co-located stations with EMS and fire. 4 of those co-locations are 24-hour stations, and 2 are 12-hour stations. The map here shows the locations of our EMS stations. There's one correction. Our EMS Station 4 at Mount Willing Road shows up on the map twice. I assure you there's only one of them. And so where our co-location stations are located, Medic 2 is actually located at West Main Street, and that's at Carborough Fire Rescue Station 1. Medic 3, our newest station, is located at Chapel Hill Fire Station 2 at Hamilton Road. Medic 5 is our newest co-location, so that's the latest one that we've moved into, and they're at Enos Fire Station number 2 on St. Mary's Road. Medic 6 is also with Carborough Fire Rescue at their station number 2 on Homestead Road. Medic 7 is located at New Hope Fire Station number 2, located at Highway 86 South. Medic 9, when we are up and running with Medic 9, we're located at Orange Grove Fire, and I will note that station has been taken down due to critical staffing, but we have plans in place to get that station right back up and running. We have a lot of advantages to co-locating. It is absolutely advantageous for our community. When we put our ambulances out into those communities, we're visible with fire. The fire departments are so active in their communities, and we have a lot of visitors that come to the station, and just by default, they also get an opportunity to see and interact with EMS personnel and our equipment. So it is really advantageous for community members in those districts. We often take advantage of training opportunities together. So it's very common for us to walk into a fire station and see EMS and fire engaging in Con Ed activities. We can train quickly on new equipment, and that actually benefits our patients so that when we get on the scene together, we're familiar with each other and we're familiar with how that equipment works. It has absolutely improved our professional relationships. We have a very transparent and open relationship with our fire chiefs and our fire personnel. So I will tell you that I sit up very straight when I get an email from a fire chief, quick to address any issues we may have. In another category, our people are our most important asset. But in another category, this also gives us the advantage of protecting the ambulance and the equipment and the medication on the ambulance. Before we engaged in co-location strategy, our ambulances were outside in the environment. And we have medications that have to be temperature controlled. Being inside allows us to put the ambulances on shorelines. We've also been very willing to install Plymavent adapters on all of the ambulances that co-locate to keep the breathing environment inside the fire stations clean. There have been some challenges. There's always challenges to co-location. Many of our existing fire stations were not designed with EMS resources in mind. And so a lot of the space is limited. So this really becomes palpable during weather events. So both fire and EMS, we like to up staff, or we like to bring in off-duty personnel so that they're not affected by travel, because we're kind of more like the post office. We're gonna be there 24/7, and sometimes that space is really limited. We have different missions and different cultures. An example of this would be in EMS, our shift changes at 6 a.m., and many of our fire department partners, their shift changes at 7. EMS, we stack our chores at the beginning of the day where our call volume is the lowest, and firehouses, many of them, they bring their chores to usually the afternoon, and unfortunately, that's when EMS call volume is at its highest and its maximum. So sometimes we sort of miss each other doing those chores together. The facilities have different requirements for EMS and fire, and sometimes we work around those challenges. We have future plans for co-locations, and we're really excited to be working with Orange Rural Fire Department. We actually have a meeting this coming Thursday. We're entering the design phase for a station to be built at the in the Waterstone subdivision. We're extraordinarily excited about that strategic location. That gives us great access to all of our major roadways, and it's right across from UNC Hillsborough. We are also strategically ready to respond to many of the heavy numbers of medical facilities that are popping up in Hillsborough and additional senior housing in Hillsborough. We are also working on a standalone station. Some of our standalone stations are extremely important. The standalone station we're working on first is in Efland. So this replaces the existing station that we've been in for a long, long time, and that station does not accommodate our current needs. It is absolutely strategically located to get us to the major roads. Medic 4 is the main ambulance that responds to most of our interstate activity. And so that Eflin station, it keeps us close to that. Our future is to work on a standalone station in the northern corridor at the Northern Cedar Grove Community Center. All of our models are showing a strong impact that that station would have for our citizens in northern Orange County, and it's located right smack in the center of northern Orange County. Over to Dinah.
In conclusion, we definitely have more strategic planning needed. One of the issues we identified very quickly in Orange County, and I've been here 37 years, the very first new station we've ever had was the Chapel Hill Hamilton Road Station. We have always inhabited something that's there that we have to kind of adjust to. The co-locations with our fire partners have been invaluable, and they have welcomed us very much with open arms. And I'm not going to stand up here like a lion parent. Yes, our children do butt heads every once in a while, but everybody is very, very cooperative. Everybody talks. And so we're able to bring all of our issues to the table. We work extremely well together. We will continue working with our partners because that's the way we continue to provide excellence to our community. And our people always like to say, we provide more than is expected, and we want to continue doing that. I end with the fact that our vision is that we are a prepared, coordinated, and integrated emergency services system. Without all of you as our partners, without all of our fire partners, without our law enforcement partners, we could not do it alone. And we are very, very fortunate in Orange County. You have some of the best trained, most professional responders in the state, and absolutely I put them up against the nation. Thank you all very much for allowing us this time, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? Sammy, followed by Earl.
Thank you for your presentation and all the work that y'all do. We in Carver just did a facility assessment, and it's intriguing to hear the co-location aspect of this. At our fire station, there's some space next to it, and so if the funding came from the county, the question of building on the station, and then related to that, you have a standalone station in downtown Carborough, the opportunity for economic development, assuming that that's redundant, that standalone station, and that you could accomplish a similar standalone co-located fire department. I'm just putting this on the table as an opportunity for maximizing the co-location aspects of it, for exploration as an economic development opportunity for downtown Carborough too. So that's for our economic development director, and obviously for our county commissioners, so that you can front the money to build this standalone facility or co-located facility.
And we are definitely open to all invites. The standalone station that you're talking about in Carborough, that is South Orange Rescue Squad. And we had operated with them at one time, but their space is very, very limited. And there's no base space, equipment space for any of our stuff. So our ambulances were still outside, and our people were not able to sleep there either. But all offers, we'll take them on the table, yes.
I didn't realize that you're separate entities. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to commend you and the emergency services as well as the fire departments, because I vividly remember about 8 or 10 years ago, the discussions that surrounded this co-location idea, and some very strong skepticism on all parties because this had been tried years ago and had failed, and we, of course, did not want to fail again. So you mentioned parents and children a while ago. I appreciate you being one of the parents to make this happen.
Thank you.
And it is difficult. It's two different cultures. There's no reason it can't continue to work. I think it's working fine. I would encourage you all to restaff the co-location in Orange Grove. I know of at least 2 instances of where the ambulance being in Orange Grove saved a tragic situation. In fact, one of them, I think, would have been an absolute death involved if it had not been for that ambulance being there. So congratulations for making it work this far, and let's continue to make it work. I think that is a absolute vital part of making sure that we do it in a economically beneficial way for the county and also a beneficial way for the people of Orange County.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Lydia?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for this presentation. I had 2 questions. One was, you noted that the highest call volume, one of the higher ones was in Carborough, and you're at both of our fire stations. I'm assuming that was at fire station number 1?
We are located at both fire stations, but those call locations are all calls in Carborough
All right,
for
awesome.
EMS.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to also, just at this time, take the opportunity, y'all. We actually have a new fire chief in Carborough. His name is Dave Schmidt, and he's over there in the back by Annette Stone. So I just wanted to introduce him to everyone. He started with us last month and came to us from Elgin, Illinois, and he has over 30 years of experience. He was very high up there, and we're really happy to have him in Carborough.
So I noticed that Hillsborough had the second highest call volume, and I was just curious, is that Hillsborough proper or the greater Hillsborough Township?
I believe that's the greater Hillsborough Township.
It is. It's going to be, we look at it based on stations and their districts. And so our Hillsborough call volume came in second because of Station 1 and Station 5 that moves up to 1 quite often. The reason Hillsborough has grown in numbers, all the medical facilities that have gone up. And we are there. There's not a single day in the week that we're not there.
Alan?
I have a great deal of gratitude for the work of EMS personnel, so I thank you, and I also thank you for a very informative presentation. I did have one question, and this stems from the first issue part of the presentation. I was wondering, so the number of instances in which we've relied on mutual aid partners, I think you said it was 208. I'm wondering, how does that compare to past years? Is that higher, lower? How are we kind of trending in terms of our reliance on our partners?
And also just remember, we're not through with the year yet.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I would say that I think back in 2010, we had come to the same group in a little bit of a crisis. And as we compared that to then, I think we're in better shape. But I think the trend is moving up. So that's just, we're keeping a very close eye on that. I think Orange County, Durham County, and Alamance County, I wish we could all figure this out together, but there are just surge days. And unfortunately, they don't parse out so that it's easy to make sure you have staffing for that, but it's palpable. And the good news so far, and I knock on wood, is that our surge days don't typically correspond with theirs. So, that's anecdotal.
I actually have another question about the mutual aid, and I noticed that Alamance and Durham are obviously the ones that are of the highest number. Now, remind me, is that us responding to situations with them, or is it the reverse?
It's the reverse. So that's the number of times Alamance and Durham have come into Orange County and they've engaged in call response when we had nothing available. And we do have something that we're very proud of our relationship with South Orange because we utilize South Orange oftentimes even before we've got mutual aid coming in.
Usually is the situation that's occurring? Is it traffic accidents? Is it just?
So thankfully, we have a very robust emergency medical dispatch system, and so our telecommunicators are prioritizing the response. And so we'll prioritize and send the closest ambulances to the most, the highest acuity call, and then we can send our mutual aid responses. So for example, if we have a non-emergency call, we would send the longest distance traveling ambulance to that. So a lot of times that's how that's working.
And also, sometimes with old heads like me, you just kind of say it's a Murphy's kind of day. And we realize, as soon as I hear that we have 3 ambulances out on the north side, I know it's a done day. We're not going to have anything all day long. And it typically happens. It's very odd.
Chapel Hill also has a new fire chief starting. We're swearing in. Venselin Harris has been switched from emergency management in our town to be our new fire chief, and he'll be sworn in next week, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. Very good.
And we look very forward to sitting down and working with you and talk. We're trying to give you time to get acclimated before we hit you with everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right, guys, so we're closing out the meeting. Informational items, written updates, not for discussion. So that's it. Good evening. Let's all adjourn.